So I know I gotta play a lot of catch up. I've been dealing with some life stuff lately. I haven't been able to make videos, but I have seen movies this past month, and so I'm gonna play catch up one by one, starting with the most recent thing I've seen, and work my way down throughout the films of the last month or so that I have missed and haven't reviewed, just so I can play some catch up. So let's get into it, starting with the best MCU movie I've seen in a while, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I was really nervous initially about Guardians 3 because the MCU in general has been rather inconsistent lately. I've liked some of their movies in the most recent phase, and I've also heavily disliked, as you know, some of the other ones. So I was really nervous about this. I was hoping that this film could just deliver on being an emotional finish to the Guardians and what they've all brought to the MCU, and thankfully this was so much more than that. I genuinely love this movie, and I love what James Gunn was able to do with closing out these characters. He just knows what to do with these characters. This is his sandbox, and he plays with it so well, and you see that, and that shines so well here with Volume 3. Starting with the characters, I'm gonna go right into it. Rocket Raccoon just might be my favorite MCU protagonist in this whole, universe at this point. I love the melancholic nature that Rocket brings to this movie, and that infects the tone of the overall film as a whole, and it brings just a different feeling from Guardians 1 and 2, while still feeling familiar at the same time in all the ways that work. I really loved learning about Rocket's backstory here, and it is the pivotal heart and soul of this movie. He is the soul of this movie, and it works so well, and the film is able to balance that with all the other Guardians. What's so smart about the story here is that it is embedded in Rocket's backstory. So when you're constantly getting flashbacks back and forth to when Rocket was younger and what he was dealing with, no spoilers here, of course, and the whole thing with High Evolutionary and him as a villain of the story, it's really well done. The movie did a good job at flashing back to getting his backstory while dealing with the immediate stakes of what was going on with the Guardians. Here, the whole film is about saving Rocket and what that entails, without giving too much away. I love how the film takes no time in doing that. You're able to get a quick setup in what is, I think, the best opening in the Guardians films. From the immediate opening credits, you get a sense of the world, what it feels like, what the characters are going through, how they're doing in that scenario, and what the tone of the film is going to be. And it's all done in under 10 minutes flat with just an opening shot. It is brilliant, and it is all because of the direction of Gunn and what his team brings to the table here. And I love how organic the story is able to unfold emotionally without so much exposition, without having to spell it out to you. I think it's brilliant. The film's not always telling a story through the dialogue, while that is there, and it is endearing and it is very comedic. A lot of the backbone of the story is the visual storytelling, the designs of what these animals have gone through the High Evolutionary's experiments. Brought so much soul and heart to this movie. I cried several times. I loved that element of this. I love the angle, the tragic angle of Guardians 3 is so well done. And that brings us to Star-Lord in this movie. I'm so glad we're getting Star-Lord treated right again. I love him in this movie. He's so well done, and I like the fact that we explore a flawed side of him. He can't let go of his past, and that's a big part of this movie and his emotional journey that's so well explored. We have a different Gamora now that doesn't remember everything because of the fallout of Endgame and Infinity War. And what I love here is that the film doesn't try to cut corners. It doesn't do any weird movie magic where, everything's immediately reset to the original status quo of Guardians 2. I feel like a lot of movies could do that cheap route where it's just like, a few things happened off screen, now everything's back to normal, we can just make another Guardians movie. No. This movie takes the fallout of the last few films and lets those stakes marinate, and it creates something even better for this one. No pun intended on that, by the way. Chris Pratt brings his all to this performance, and this is the best I think I've seen him as Star-Lord, is easily in this movie, hands down. That really goes for all the cast. I think all the Guardians cast is at their A-game here and at their strongest here. They've been great before, but you just get so many more layers here now that they've gone through their journeys. They've had their arcs, and now we get to see them close off here with Drax especially. I actually really like what they did with Drax in this film. I'm not going to spoil it. I just love the fact that they highlight an element of his character that originally I thought was something that detracted from him. There was a comedic element with Drax that he started doing in Volume 2, which I did like. However, I thought it made him kind of flat in other areas, wanting revenge on Thanos. However, what they do here with Drax, I think it's very clever. It subverted my expectations while also giving me an actual character beat that works for him. And it really emotionally satisfied me. And by the end, I was like, no, the way Drax has been written throughout this whole series has been brilliant. And I love that he's this fatherly comedic essence for the family of the Guardians. And that it makes them smile. And the ability to make someone laugh is just as important as the ability to be real with someone when they need it. And I love that this film knows how to balance those two elements of what make a family a family. Hello, Venus. How are you? This is another part of my family right here. Hello, baby. Yes. You just went up a lot. This is my family. Well, now that I have my cat here, we can actually talk about High Evolutionary. This dude, this guy, the villain of this story is absolutely awful, and how he treats the poor animals in this movie makes you hate him so much. I cannot stand this dude. Evolutionary is one of the best villains I've seen in a comic book movie. The ego on this guy, you just hate him so much by the end of this film. It's so brilliant how the High Evolutionary, you get a really good sense of his ego in this movie. It's so fragile. He's able to stay all cool, calm, and collected and intimidating, but once you see how Rocket is able to fracture that ego, the way that influences how he behaves around Rocket compared to his subordinates is so telling about his character. Not only that, High Evolutionary also really cleverly ties into the rest of the trilogy, and I like how he played into the Sovereign and that species from Volume 2. High Evolutionary does a great job at coming in and being a menacing presence for Rocket Raccoon, and you also hate him for what he's done, not just for the physical abuse, but for the mental torture that he put this character through. All of that stuff is established through flashbacks alone, and I think that just goes for the writing in this movie. Before you even meet the villain in present tense of the movie, you already hate him. Guardians 3 does a great job at exploring trauma and what that means, and it doesn't shy away from the uglier elements of it that I think other movies typically would. And it's really ballsy to do that in a movie that was typically meant for kids and families. I can't see myself bringing my kid to this movie. I don't have a kid, but I can't see myself bringing my very young child to this film. There are some brutal moments in here, and I respect the movie for going that angle, because at the end of the day, an abuser doesn't do things that are squeaky clean. They're not good people. The film would have done a disservice by shying away from that. This is the best action I've seen in the Guardians films, easily. I love every single set piece in this movie, and while the action is sparse when it is done, it is intense, it is gritty. This movie brought more of a grit and a harsher nature to the fight scenes than 1 and 2 did, and I really appreciated that. It just brings a lot more excitement. And when I saw it the second time, whenever fight scenes were coming up, I was getting jacked, because it's like, all right, I can't wait to see some badass choreography and just some clean-cut, brutal action that we haven't seen since, well, I mean, in this case, Wakanda Forever had some, but I'm glad we're starting to see that kind of stuff come back. And it's making me happy to see in this one especially. The opening of this movie is brutal. The action sequence at the end is hardcore and badass and exciting, but also brutal at the same time. While it hypes you up, it jacks you up. You feel every impact. You feel every hit. And that's what good action means. And I love that it's in Guardians 3. Again, awesome. There's a one-take sequence in this movie. Dude, like, it blew me away. Genuinely blew me away. And I hope we see more of that, because now I'm spoiled from that. The action's top-notch, the characters are top-notch, the comedy made me laugh. Everything about Guardians 3 I just honestly genuinely loved. I don't really have a flaw with this movie, especially on the second watch. I thought the pacing was a little rough the first time I watched it, but seeing it a second time, that heist they do is just, it's awesome, it's exciting, and all of the needle drops. The soundtrack in this movie especially deserves a shout-out. The soundtrack is awesome. James Gunn is great at needle drops. He knows when to infuse them and when they work with the character, and I loved each moment a song dropped in this film, because it was informing of the character while also emotionally investing us into the story. And on top of that, we get a good song to hear at the same time. James Gunn is the best of that, and Guardians 3 is no exception. I adore this film. This is the best MCU movie I've seen, I think, in Phase 4, other than No Way Home, in my opinion. I really loved it. Go watch it. Please go see it in theaters. It deserves your love. It deserves the watch. And yeah, Guardians 3 was awesome. That's my review on that. I have some other stuff to talk about now. Let's get into it, because Evil Dead Rise, whew!